So it was question of, lifestyle versus commitment to my art. And I decided commitment to my art takes place over lifestyle. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Everest. I'm Radley, author of Unhuman, and today we're going to be talking about something interesting. So, no, it's not clickbait. Yes, it takes me about a decade to write a book. Now you may be like, hold on, what? It takes you a decade? What do you mean? Okay, we're gonna go through this, but first of all, before we get into the video, please make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment on what you think about the video as we're going along, and if you want to support me, my channel, and my book, links are in the description below. So anyway, getting into this, the best way to do this video is probably to include a little timeline, so I will be doing that here. But I'm basically going to be going through my writing process, how I get ideas, and how I use those ideas to produce novels, and why it takes me so long. Because that's ultimately the big question, right? Why would it take me 10 years to write a book? So we're going to go over that. So to explain the best that I can, I'm going to be using my book Unhuman as an example. I'm going to be talking about how I got through the creative process and how I managed to get to where I am today in terms of producing the series as it is. So I first came up with the idea for Unhuman in fall 2012, I believe. So back then I was 13 years old. I was currently writing on different writing websites, and I was actively sharing my work with different people. And here's how Unhuman looked back then. So Unhuman was not what it is today. If you have read the book and you know what it's about, you'd know that this is going to be very different. But Unhuman was about a family in the middle of an apocalypse with a couple of, they were in a group, but not necessarily a very tight-knit group. There wasn't very many people in this group, and their whole purpose was kind of like WALL-E. They were there to clean up pollution from this world, and that was their thing. They were living in a world full of monsters, and that was their purpose in life. So I remember when I first started the book, everything was brown, dark. There were piles of toxic sludge everywhere, fumes. They had to wear masks. It was very
2 shots of vodka,
ultra sci-fi, dystopian-esque. It was not really a post-apocalyptic world that you'd want to live in by any means. It was just covered in garbage, and it was utterly disgusting, right? That's where Unhuman first got its start. So I wrote the first 8 chapters to the novel from the fall of 2012 to the end of winter, so the beginning of 2013. And at that point, I had written these chapters, but I really had no idea where I wanted to go with this book. I liked the characters, I liked some of the world building, and I liked the monsters, but I had no idea where to take it next. It didn't, I was just stuck. And it wasn't creative block by any means, because I was writing other novels and I was still feeling that creative energy. I just literally had no idea where I wanted to go with this book. So I decided to myself I would take the novel and I'd put it to the side and I just leave it and let it sit there, and maybe I'll get some ideas, and I'll keep it in the back of my mind and I'll collect more ideas as I go. So anyway, fast forward about a year and a half-ish. I'm now 15, and I'm going back through my old writing looking for some inspiration and some ideas, and I see this book Unhuman, and I start reading through it again. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this project. And by the time that I get to the end of the 8 chapters, I'm like, okay, there's something here worth writing about. But first of all, I've got to change this world because there's a lot wrong with it. After spending several weeks, or I should say several years, in different science programs, different science classes, I realized that a lot of what I had written was wrong and just scientifically inaccurate. So a lot of the toxic sludge, waste, everything had to go. Like, I remember saying to myself, you cannot have a world full of garbage and still have it look like the world just ended and have 100 years pass by. Like, there has got to be some geographical changes or some climate changes that have been going on. So I picked up the series. I wrote an outline for it this time, and I actually had a plot and things that I was using to build the series. And so I finished Unhuman, the first book. And at this point, it was a book series. That's another big change that I'll be talking about. So the first book was about 600 pages long. And I finished that book 2 months before my birthday. So like March, May, around that area. So basically the beginning of summer, late spring, in 2014. So that's when I finished the first book of Unhuman. And at that point, it was still very skeleton. It was very thin. A lot of the characters that currently exist in the series didn't exist back then. Back then, there were only Blythe, her brother, her parents, and the main antagonist and a few other ones. There were not a lot of all these additional characters that you see in the current book. Like, Cressa didn't exist, Genevieve didn't exist, Royal didn't exist. So basically, a lot of the main original cast that you will see in the current series did not exist back then. It was very skeleton, it was very thin, it was a detailed description of the plot outline put into a book, essentially. But at that point, I was so proud of myself and I felt so accomplished that I kept writing, and I got all the way through book 2, which at the time I called Unhuman. As I was writing later, I decided to transition the format. Here, I was following the standard 3-book trilogy format that was very popular at the time, and that I was using because I wanted to be published by a traditional publisher. So I figured, if I want to be published by a traditional publisher, I should probably use the same formats that they're using, and at that time it was trilogies. So, I finished the first 600-page book. I got about 200-something pages into the second book. I was halfway through, but at that time, I hit that creative block again. So it wasn't that I necessarily stopped writing. I was still working on other projects, but even though I had planned this whole plot out and everything in it, it was just missing something. I got to that point and I realized, I don't know what this is missing. I don't know if it's character or if it's story or if it's plot related. I don't know if it's missing action or if it's missing emotion. Like, there's just something here. Like, this is not the standard that I want this book to be. So at this point, I decided to take the book series, because now it was a book and a half, and I put them off to the side again. And then I kept writing and writing and writing in the meantime. But again, fast forward another 2 years. It is 2017. I am in my first year of college. And I'm looking through my projects that I've been writing over this time. And I come back to Unhuman and I start reading it. And I literally read everything that I had written, and I read it in like 2 days. I consumed that writing and I was like,
she's got a point. She's an icon. She's a legend. And she is the moment.
At that point, in the middle of those 2 years, I had come to the conclusion that, maybe I wouldn't end up publishing these books after all, because first of all, dystopian as a genre had died out. Like, hardcore died out. Publishers weren't publishing dystopian anymore. There weren't many dystopian readers that I was seeing active anymore. I was struggling to get people to be interested in dystopian because a lot of people were very jaded, especially with some of the later dystopian books that came out. So I just was under the impression that it was not going to happen and it wasn't worth my time at all. However, in that first year in college, I realized, this is something that I can't let go. This is a part of me that I need to publish and I need to show everyone else. So I started thinking about the story, and I started looking at the characters more in depth, and I started looking at the plot and the emotional balances and stuff, and I asked myself, where do I want to go with the story? Like, what is this story about? Because I can make it about monsters, and there will be people who will love that and they will think it is the best thing ever. Or I can make it a story about war and political violence and how that leads to a world unsavable, an apocalypse. I could make it about that. That'd be very easy, and people would also probably be interested in that. But ultimately, while asking myself these questions, I realized that it came down to neither war, no monsters. The ultimate feeling that I had from this series was growth and love.
What?
So when I was thinking about the series, and I realized the biggest selling point about this was not the monsters, not the political warfare, is about the main character coming to live through trauma from a very difficult time period, and coming to not only understand herself and her weaknesses, but also to love herself, and also the love that people share with each other, and how they interact with each other.
You know, it was all about survival and love. And, you know, that's the thing about this movie, is that it's a love story, you know. And that's one of the things that I think that made this movie a success. And I think it's a great love story.
I watched that, and Terminator was one of my favorite movies. So I watched that, and I was like, that just clicked for me. That was the clicking point where I was like, yes, this is. I feel the exact same way about my series. Like, it has all these elements of action and intrigue, but ultimately, what makes Unhuman is the fact that it is a love story. So now that I had found that purpose, several years later, now that I had found that purpose and that focus for my story, I was able to take it one step beyond what I had previously. So instead of focusing all my time and effort on making an action-packed story or making something that was like super rushed and gritty, I instead came through and I redesigned the story under this new film, or this new concept of its love, its family, its self-growth, etc. And from that point, I started to rewrite the series. So that's when Genevieve appeared, Cressa, Royal, a lot of these other characters that are side characters or not necessarily the main character of the series. That's when all these other characters started to appear in the series. And I started writing. So in 2017, I wrote through 2017 to the beginning of 2018. So from fall to spring. And I got halfway through the plot of the original book. And at that point, I was at about 500 pages in, and I realized the plot that I had planned originally was too long for what I wanted to do with it. So I ended up coming to this point where I was like, well, I can either cut back on all of these revisions that I had just made, and I can cut back on everything that I feel like makes the series special, and I can focus more on that 3-book sellable, marketable trilogy idea, or I can continue with what I feel like makes the book worth reading and aim for quality versus quantity, essentially. And that was a very difficult decision to make because, first of all, I still had hopes of being a traditionally published author at the time. That was my goal back in 2018, and I was really considering, wanting to publish these books, and I was hoping for that. So I had to take a step back, and I had to seriously think about where I wanted to go with this series, with the characters, with the story. So I spent the rest of 2018 and the middle of 2019, or no, all the way through to 2019, just taking a step back, thinking about my characters, thinking about world building, and my goals with not only this project, but with writing as well. By the end of 2019, I had decided, okay, you know what? Chances are that my dystopian book, despite how much I love it and how good I know it is, and how much effort that I put into it, it's probably not going to get published in the first place. Traditional publishing at the time had basically booted dystopian as a category. You can't sell it, you can't get agents for it. Doesn't really matter how good it is or how good it isn't. They just weren't selling it at all. So I decided, instead of focusing on traditional publishing, I'm going to do what the story needs me to do. I'm going to finish it the way the story needs me to finish it. Which was a very hard decision, by the way, because looking at, being an author, part of that you have to focus on is money, especially if you want to do it as a career. And if you don't focus on the money aspect, first and foremost, chances are it's going to be very difficult for you to be a full-time author. So it was a question of, lifestyle versus commitment to my art. And I decided commitment to my art takes place over lifestyle. So end of 2019, I picked up the series again. This time, instead of writing it into books, that's when the volumes appeared. And I decided I'm going to bundle these into smaller groupings, so that way I can write more content and write more material and actually expand the story the way that it needs to be expanded. And hopefully this also satisfies my readers. So that's where the volume concept came in. It's the only series that I will produce that has that concept in it, and it is entirely unique to Unhuman. It uses the same format of a periodical. I decided to continue with that idea and with that pursuit, and from there everything kind of just fell into place. Everything felt so much better when I was writing the series from that point on, knowing that that was the format that I was going to take. So it allowed me to expand and explore even more than I had previously. So I just felt so in control and so connected to my own story that now I don't really worry about where my story is going or how my story is feeling, because I know ultimately that the pacing is going to be what it needs to be, the characters are going to be where they need to be, and everything is just going to line up the way that it should have the first time around. But keep in mind, so I published my first book in 2021 after writing for all that time, and I'm currently going to publish the second one in 2022. Spoiler alert, yeah, the second book's coming out in 2022. And from there, I'll continue publishing. But it was a process to get to that point. Because, as I said before, I started the series in 2012, right? So it has been nearly a decade in the process of, generating ideas, creativity, putting things together, figuring out the correct format, and figuring out my goals for my series and how I wanted to go about it. It took me a long time. And a lot of people would think, oh, that's so unsustainable to write in that way. But the way that I've learned that is best for me to write is I stagger all these things. So when I put something to the side and when I allow things to collect ideas and to build, I'm not just sitting here, doing nothing and waiting around. I'm actively looking for more inspiration, or I'm writing. So while I was focusing on Unhuman and letting the ideas generate and building my creativity for that, I was also spending a lot of time writing my fantasy book, which I hope to release in the next year or so, which went through a very similar process as Unhuman did. It first started off as a psychological thriller, then the genre changed to fantasy, and then characters and things expanded, the world expanded. So yeah, it had the whole, back and forth, back and forth. But ultimately, what I found is that by allowing myself to have that time period where I put things away and I let them sit and I let them collect ideas and new inspiration, what I found is that I can take tropes or relationships or concepts that were very popular years ago, and I can combine them with tropes or concepts that are very popular now. And it allows me to bend genres, bend ideas, flip tropes, try new things that I feel like I would have never tried had I just written the book in the year or two that I first originally started with that idea. Because that's how it is for a lot of authors. They come up with an idea and they immediately get started either planning or thinking about that idea, or like really putting a lot of effort and time into that idea, so that 2 years from that point they have a fully produced book and they're selling that. But I just find that that doesn't work for me. And yes, it does take me a long time to produce books. In that case, everything about Unhuman started in 2012, and it will probably not be finished until at least 2030 because of how many books there are. So there's a lot of work that is going to be involved, and it's going to take me a lot of time to actually push those ideas forward. But I know that the content that I'm giving people and the experiences that I'm giving people are worth reading, and they're worth sharing, and they're worth remembering, most importantly, because that's what I ultimately want people to take out of these stories. Is I want there to be something that they remember, something that becomes part of them. Because what's the point of writing and reading if you're not looking to expand your personal universe? So that's my whole goal for why I write the way I write. That's the reason why it takes me so long. I feel like it is so much more rewarding than if I were just to come up with an idea and then write that idea as is.
But people will say, do you keep a notebook? And the answer is, I think a writer's notebook is the best way in the world to immortalize bad ideas. My idea about a good idea is one that sticks around and sticks around and sticks around. It's like, to me, it's like if you were to put breadcrumbs in a strainer and shake it, which is what the passage of time is for me. It's like shaking a strainer. All this stuff that's not very big and not very important just kind of dissolves and falls out. But the good stuff stays. The big pieces stay.
So I believe in a very similar process. If something sticks with me throughout all that time that I've put it off and that I've let it sit and that I've let things take over and I've done other things, if something still sticks with me through this whole process, then I know that it's worth writing. And I know that it's going to mean something to someone else beyond just myself. Because I can write for myself all day long. I enjoy writing and I enjoy reading. But ultimately, my goal as a writer is to create something that helps other people. So yeah, that is my writing process. I know it sounds super weird and odd and very complicated, but it's the way that I get things done. And hopefully you found this either informative or enjoyable. If you want to be a writer as well, this is a way that you can try writing. It does take a while. So if you're a writer or if you're an author, feel free to tell me how you write and how you process your creativity in the comments below. I'm always super interested to see how others are handling their own creativity. So please comment and leave a comment in the comments below. If you like this video, share it with friends, especially if you believe it can help them with their writing process. And lastly, if you want to support me and my channel, feel free to check out Unhuman. I have the first chapter linked below and the sales links as well to Amazon and Google Play, so check those out below. But until next time, bye guys!